Some griefs never leave. They only learn to sit quietly in a man's chest, waiting for the smallest thing to wake them. For 3 years, Choi Byum-suk had built his life around one dead woman's memory. He had money enough to buy anything in Seoul, yet nothing could buy back the sound of his wife's laughter, or the warmth of her hand in his. Then, on an ordinary afternoon in an ordinary restaurant, he saw her face again. What followed was not a haunting. It was the beginning of a truth that had been buried for 29 years. A truth that would unravel 2 families, 2 continents, and one impossible resemblance that was never meant to be explained. This is the story of a grieving billionaire, the wife he lost, and the secret neither of them ever knew existed. Let's dive into it. Byum-suk stopped breathing the moment he saw her. She was sitting alone near the window of the restaurant, quietly eating lunch, completely unaware that the man staring at her from across the room had just seen a ghost. His wife's face, the same eyes, the same lips, the same small dimple on her left cheek. Even the way she tucked her hair behind her ear was exactly the same. Byum-suk's hands began to tremble. No, couldn't be. His wife had been dead for 3 years. He had held her hand when she took her final breath. He had watched the doctors cover her face. He had stood beside her coffin. He had watched the soil fall onto her grave. Yet there she was, alive, sitting less than 20 feet away. Byum-suk walked toward her without realizing he was moving. The woman looked up. Their eyes met. Byum-suk's voice broke. "Giana." The woman frowned. "Excuse me?" He came closer. "It was you." She slowly stood. "I think you have mistaken me for someone else." Byum-suk shook his head violently. No, I know you. I know my wife." The woman stared at him in confusion. "Your wife?" "Yes." His eyes filled with tears. "You're my wife." She stepped backward. "Sir, I don't know you." Byum-suk reached for her hand. She pulled away immediately. "Please don't touch me." The restaurant had gone silent. People were beginning to stare. A security guard hurried toward them. The woman pointed at Byum-suk with trembling fingers. "This man is harassing me." Byum-suk looked at the security guard as though he couldn't understand what was happening. "She's my wife." The security guard stepped between them. "Sir, please calm down." "She's my wife." The woman grabbed her handbag and hurried toward the exit. Byum-suk followed for a few steps before the security guard stopped him. He stood there, completely broken, watching her disappear through the restaurant doors. For 3 years, he had begged God to give him one more day with his wife. Now, when he finally saw her again, she looked at him like he was a stranger. That night, Byum-suk sat alone in the dark. His mother's voice came from the doorway. "You need to stop doing this to yourself." He didn't answer. On the table in front of him was an old photograph. His wife was smiling in it. Byum-suk touched the photograph with shaking fingers. "Mother," his voice cracked. "I saw her today." His mother closed her eyes. Byum-suk continued. "She was alive." His mother walked toward him slowly. "Byum-suk, your wife has been dead for 3 years. I know what I saw. You have been grieving for too long. I know what I saw." His voice echoed through the room. His mother flinched. Byum-suk looked back at the photograph. "That was my wife." His mother sat beside him. "You buried her with your own hands." Byum-suk's tears finally fell. "Then why did I see her?" His mother had no answer. But there was something neither of them could explain. The woman he had seen that afternoon had Giana's face, and she had no idea who he was. 3 years before that afternoon, Byum-suk had been the happiest man in Korea. He had everything people dreamed of: money, power, a family name respected throughout Seoul. But none of it mattered to him after he met Giana. She was not the woman his family had chosen for him. She wasn't from a wealthy family. She didn't have powerful connections. She wasn't interested in his money, and that was exactly why he fell in love with her. The first time his mother met Giana, she barely hid her disappointment. "You cannot seriously be thinking about marrying her." Byum-suk smiled. "I am. She has nothing to offer this family. She has me." His mother stared at him. And what happens when your feelings change? They won't. His mother warned him that he was throwing away his future. His relatives whispered that Giana had trapped him. They accused her of chasing his money. Some even told Biamsuk that she would eventually embarrass the family. But Giana never fought them. Whenever Biamsuk came home angry, she would simply take his hand. Let them talk. I don't care what they think of me. I care what you think. And Biamsuk would always answer the same way. I know exactly who you are. I love you. Eventually, he married her. For the first time in years, he stopped listening to his family. He built a home with Giana. She filled the house with laughter. She learned his favorite meals. She waited for him when he worked late. She would fall asleep on the sofa while waiting for him to come home. And every night, Biamsuk would carry her to bed. He thought he had found the one thing money could never buy: happiness. Then, 3 years into their marriage, Giana became ill. At first, she insisted it was nothing. She was tired. She needed rest. But the fatigue became worse. Then came the hospital visits, the tests, the long conversations with doctors, and finally, the diagnosis that shattered Biamsuk's world. The illness was aggressive. There was very little they could do. Biamsuk refused to accept it. He flew specialists from different countries to Seoul. He spent millions trying to save her. He slept beside her hospital bed. He held her hand every night. Whenever Giana opened her eyes, he was there. One evening, she looked at him and smiled weakly. You look tired. He tried to smile. I'm fine. She knew he was lying. You have to promise me something. Don't talk like that. Promise me. He looked away. Giana squeezed his hand. If I don't get better, you have to live. I don't want to. She smiled through her tears. You don't get to choose that. I do. No, Biamsuk. She reached for his face. You loved me enough to fight for me. Now you have to love me enough to keep living when I'm gone. He couldn't answer. She wiped his tears. And for the first time since the diagnosis, Biamsuk cried in front of her. Not quietly. Not like a billionaire trying to remain strong. He cried like a husband who knew he was losing the woman he loved. A few weeks later, Giana took her final breath. Biamsuk was holding her hand. He begged her not to leave, but she was already gone. The room became unbearably quiet. Biamsuk pressed his forehead against her hand. Please, just one more minute. The doctors stood silently. He refused to let go. When they finally took her away, he followed the bed into the hallway. His mother found him sitting on the hospital floor. She had never seen her son look so broken. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, but Biamsuk barely heard anything. He stood beside the coffin. He looked at Giana's face one final time. His mother placed a hand on his shoulder. Come home. He didn't move. After everyone left, Biamsuk remained beside the grave. Rain began falling. His assistant held an umbrella over him. Biamsuk didn't move. Eventually, he whispered, I told you I would protect you. His voice broke. I'm sorry I couldn't. Then he walked away. But he never really left her behind. 3 years passed. His mother tried everything. She introduced him to beautiful women from wealthy families. He rejected everyone. One woman came to dinner wearing an expensive gown. Biamsuk barely looked at her. Another was the daughter of a powerful businessman. He ended the meeting after 10 minutes. His mother finally lost patience. You cannot spend the rest of your life mourning a dead woman. Biamsuk looked at her coldly. Then I will. And that was why the restaurant incident frightened his mother so much. After 3 years of grief, her son had finally seen a woman who looked exactly like Giana. She was terrified he was losing his mind. But Biamsuk wasn't imagining her. She was real. Her name was Camilla Wilson. She was 29 years old. She had been born and raised in America. She had never been to Korea before. She had recently accepted a position with a major Seoul company and had moved to the city alone. She had loving parents, a comfortable childhood, a successful education. promising career. And one thing she had always believed about herself. She was an only child. Camila had always been close to her mother. Even after moving to Seoul, they spoke almost every day. So after the frightening encounter at the restaurant, Camila returned to her apartment shaking. She locked the door, checked it twice, then called her mother. "Mom, something happened today." Her mother immediately noticed the fear in her voice. "What happened?" Camila told her everything. The strange man, the restaurant, the way he looked at her, the way he kept calling her another woman's name. Her mother listened quietly. "Maybe he is grieving." "I know, but Mom." Camila paused. "He was completely convinced I was his wife." Her mother sighed softly. "Maybe you remind him of her." Camila looked toward the mirror. "But Mom, he looked like he had seen a ghost." Her mother tried to reassure her. "Don't let it frighten you. He may simply be a man who hasn't accepted that his wife is gone." Camila nodded even though her mother couldn't see her. "Maybe you're right." They ended the call. Camila put her phone down, but she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man's face, the pain in his eyes, the certainty in his voice. "You're my wife." She kept wondering what kind of woman could have been loved so deeply that even 3 years after her death, her husband could still break down at the sight of another woman. Camila didn't know it yet, but Byum-suk was asking himself the exact same question. The next morning, Byum-suk called his assistant. "Find her." His assistant hesitated. "Sir?" "The woman from the restaurant. I want everything. Her name, where she works, where she lives, how long she has been in Seoul. Everything." His assistant nodded. "Yes, sir." The investigation took several days, and what they discovered only made Byum-suk more confused. Camila Wilson was exactly who she claimed to be, an American citizen, 29 years old, recently employed by a Seoul company. She had only recently arrived in Korea. Her parents were still living in America. There was nothing suspicious about her. No connection to Giana. No connection to his family. No connection to his wife. Yet she had Giana's face. Byum-suk stared at the report for a long time. Then he said, "I want to meet her." His assistant looked concerned. "Sir, are you sure?" "Yes. This time I need to know the truth." Camila didn't want to meet him. After what happened in the restaurant, she was still uncomfortable. But Byum-suk sent an apology through his assistant. He promised there would be no confrontation. He only wanted to explain himself. Eventually, Camila agreed. They met at a quiet private room in a hotel. When Camila walked in, Byum-suk stood. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. He looked at her. She looked at him. The room felt strangely silent. Camila finally sat down. "You said you wanted to explain." Byum-suk nodded. "I'm sorry for what happened at the restaurant." Camila crossed her arms. "You scared me. I know. You grabbed my hand. And you told everyone I was your wife." Byum-suk lowered his eyes. Camila studied him. "Then why did you do it?" Byum-suk looked up. "Because when I saw you, I didn't see a stranger." He reached into a folder beside him. "I saw my wife." Camila's expression tightened. "I don't understand." Byum-suk slowly pulled out a photograph. He placed it on the table. Camila glanced down and froze. The room seemed to disappear around her. She stared at the woman in the photograph. Her heart began pounding. The face looking back at her was hers. Not similar, not close. Her face, the same eyes, the same lips, the same dimple. Camila slowly picked up the photograph. "Who is she?" Byum-suk's voice was quiet. "My wife." Camila's fingers began trembling. "No." She looked from the photograph to Byum-suk. "This isn't possible." She stared at the picture again. "She looks..." Camila couldn't finish. "Exactly like you?" Byum-suk finished for her. Camila looked up. She was wearing a necklace. Byum-suk nodded. She always wore it. Camila's hand immediately went to her own neck. Her fingers touched the small pendant she had worn since childhood. Byum-suk noticed. His eyes widened. Where did you get that? Camila instinctively covered the necklace. My mother gave it to me. Biamsuk stared at it. Giana had worn the same one. Camila stood abruptly. I need to go. Biamsuk rose. Camila, I need to go. She hurried out of the room. Biamsuk didn't follow. For the first time, he was no longer certain of anything. Camila returned to her apartment and locked the door behind her. She stood in front of the mirror. She touched the necklace. Then she looked at the photograph Biamsuk had secretly given her, and placed it beside her own face. Her hands began shaking. Who was that woman? Why did she look exactly like her? And why did they have the same necklace? She picked up her phone. Her mother's number appeared on the screen. She hesitated. Then she called. Her mother answered almost immediately. Camila? Mom? Her voice trembled. I need you to tell me the truth. Her mother went silent. What happened? Camila took a breath. The man showed me a photograph of his wife. Silence. Mom? Camila continued. She looks exactly like me. Her mother's breathing changed. Camila looked at the necklace. And Mom? Her voice broke. She had the same necklace. For several seconds, no response. Then her mother whispered, Where did you say this woman lived? Korea. Another silence. Camila sat down. Mom, please. What's happening? Her mother began to cry. Camila's heart started pounding. Why are you crying? Because I have spent 29 years trying to forget something I could never truly forget. Camila stood again. What? The night you were born? She stopped. Camila waited. You were not alone. Camila's face went pale. What do you mean? Her mother began sobbing. You had a sister. Your twin sister. The words seemed to echo through the apartment. Camila slowly sat down. No, I was told she died. I believed she was gone. I cried for her. I mourned her. But I never stopped wondering what she would have looked like. Mom, I didn't know how to tell you. Tell me what? Elizabeth Wilson took a shaky breath. Camila stopped breathing. The woman in Biamsuk's photograph flashed through her mind. Giana. Her necklace. Her face. Your twin sister was alive. Camila began crying. We lost her 29 years ago. Camila looked at the photograph again. Her hands trembled. Complete silence on the phone. Camila looked at the face of the woman she had never known. The woman Biamsuk had buried. The woman who had somehow lived an entire life on the other side of the world. Her voice broke. I think the woman he buried was my sister. Elizabeth's confession continued. Neither woman spoke for a long moment. Then Elizabeth continued, unprompted, as though the dam had finally broken and she couldn't stop the water now. You were born minutes apart. I remember holding both of you in my arms. Identical. I remember counting your fingers twice, both of yours, because I couldn't believe two babies could look so alike. Then what happened to her? Your father told me she died. He said she didn't survive. But she did. Elizabeth's voice cracked. He was drowning in debt. People he owed money to were not patient men. He gave your sister to a family who desperately wanted a child. They paid him and he used it to settle what he owed. My father did that. I didn't know. Not that night. I believed him when he told me our baby had died. I cried for her. I begged to see her. But he kept telling me the doctors had taken her away. Then how did you find out? Years later, your father became very sick. He knew he was dying. Before he died, he confessed everything. Camila's breathing turned shallow. So you never found her? We tried. We searched for the family. We searched everywhere. But by the time he told me the truth, they had already moved. We didn't know where they'd gone. We didn't know what name they were using. We had nothing. So you never found her? No. I searched until I had no strength left. But I never found her. Elizabeth's voice cracked completely. And now I know she was alive. She grew up. She became a woman. She was loved. She got married. And then she died, and I never got the chance to hold her again. Camila couldn't hold her tears any longer. She bent forward and cried. Her mother cried with her, 3,000 miles away. both of them alone in rooms that suddenly felt too large. "I am so sorry," Elizabeth said. "You shouldn't apologize. I should have told you." "Why didn't you?" "I was afraid," Elizabeth admitted. "Afraid that knowing you had a twin who'd been taken away would destroy you. You were my only child, the only one I had left to raise. I didn't want you growing up wondering why your sister was taken. I didn't want you blaming yourself. I didn't want you carrying the pain I had carried for years. But you never stopped looking for her. Never. Even after your father died. I kept searching in my own way. I prayed every day. I asked God to protect her wherever she was. And every year on your birthday I remembered that somewhere in the world, another woman was born on the exact same day." Camila closed her eyes. She had spent 29 years believing she was an only child. All this time, her mother had carried the grief of a second daughter, one she thought had been stolen from her forever. Why would God let us find each other only after she was gone? Camila finally asked. Elizabeth had no answer. Neither did Camila. That night, Camila didn't sleep. She kept looking at Giana's photograph, imagining the life her sister had lived. Her first steps, her first day of school, her first heartbreak, her wedding, her illness, her final moments. Everything Camila had missed. Everything Giana had never known about her. Before dawn, she whispered to the photograph, "I wish I had known you." Across Seoul, Byum-suk was awake too, sitting in the same room where he had spent countless nights mourning his wife. Tonight was different. For the first time, he knew the truth. Giana had a sister who had spent 29 years not knowing she existed, and who was now living in Seoul. The next morning, Byum-suk asked Camila to meet him again. This time, she agreed without hesitation. When she arrived, he stood immediately. He looked at the photograph between them. "Your mother told you everything?" "She told me about my sister, Giana." Saying the name aloud made the loss feel real for the first time. He noticed the tears forming in her eyes. "She was a good woman." Camila smiled sadly. "Tell me about her." He looked surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." So he began. He told her about the first time they met. The bookstore, the top shelf, the laugh that undid him. The little things she did that annoyed him. The things that made him laugh. The way she would become stubborn whenever she believed she was right. The way she cared about people. The way she loved her family, even the ones who never fully loved her back. Camila listened to every word. Sometimes she laughed. Sometimes she cried. And sometimes she simply stared at the table, because hearing about Giana felt like listening to someone describe a life that should have been hers too. Did she suffer? She finally asked. At the end, his face changed. She was very sick. Was she afraid? His eyes filled with tears. She was more worried about me than herself. Camila closed her eyes. That sounds like something I would do. I thought you were her. I know. When I saw you, I forgot everything. I forgot that she was dead. I forgot that I buried her. For one moment, I believed God had given her back to me. She wiped her tears. But I'm not her. No. He looked at her carefully. You're not. And I don't want to be. I understand. But I am her sister. He lowered his eyes. Yes. And I want to know everything about the woman I never got to meet. Then I will tell you everything I remember. It was in this conversation, quiet and unhurried, that something settled between them. Not romance, nothing close to it, but the particular tenderness of two people who had both lost the same woman in different ways, and who recognized in each other the shape of that loss. A week later, Byum-suk invited Camila to the family house. It was not a small gesture. In a household like his, an invitation to the house was an announcement, whether he intended it that way or not. His mother would be there. The staff who had served Giana her tea for 3 years would be there. Every person who had loved her, resented her, or simply worked around her would see, for the first time, the face of a woman who was and was not her. Camila almost didn't go. She stood outside the gate for a long moment, the same way she'd once stood outside her own apartment building, scanning for a threat she couldn't name. You don't have to do this today, Byum-suk told her. meeting her at the entrance. I know. She straightened her coat. I want to. They walked in together. The reaction was immediate and involuntary. A housekeeper carrying a tray of tea stopped so suddenly that the cups rattled. A younger staff member actually gasped and pressed a hand to her mouth before catching herself. In the sitting room, the same sitting room where his mother had once tried to buy Giana's disappearance. His mother rose from her chair, and for one full second, her composure, famous throughout the family for never cracking, simply fell away. Giana, she breathed, before she could stop herself. Mother, Byung-suk said quietly. This is Camila. His mother's hand went to her chest. She did not sit back down. She stood very still, staring, and something crossed her face that Camila couldn't read. Not quite shock, not quite grief. Something closer to a door being forced open on a room she had kept locked for 3 years. You look, his mother started and then stopped herself, unable to finish the sentence any way that felt safe to say out loud. I know, Camila said gently. I'm told that a lot now. Dinner that evening was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with politeness. Camila noticed his mother watching her across the table. Not with warmth, not yet, but with the fixed, searching attention of someone rereading a page she thought she already understood. Once, when Camila reached for her water glass with her left hand, his mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth, and she set it down without eating. Later, alone in the hallway, Byung-suk's mother stopped Camila before she left. Giana was left-handed too, she said, quietly, almost like an accusation. I hadn't thought of that in years. I'm sorry, Camila said, not entirely sure what she was apologizing for. Don't be. His mother's voice was strange. Not unkind, but not warm either. It isn't your fault you look like her. A pause. It isn't hers either. I only wish I had understood that while she was alive. She said nothing else, and walked away before Camila could respond. It was the first crack in a wall that had taken 3 years, and one uncanny resemblance, to even begin showing its age. 2 weeks later, Elizabeth Wilson boarded a plane to Korea for the first time in her life. She had never traveled outside the United States. She did not speak a word of Korean beyond what Camila had hurriedly taught her over the phone. Thank you, mostly, repeated until she could say it without stumbling. She packed and unpacked her suitcase 4 times. She told her neighbor she was visiting her daughter, which was true, and did not mention the second daughter, because she still could not say it out loud to anyone who hadn't lived the last month with her. Camila met her at the airport. When Elizabeth came through the gate and saw her daughter's face, she didn't say anything at first. She simply dropped her carry-on bag and held her tightly, the way you hold something you were afraid you might lose twice. I kept thinking about the flight, Elizabeth admitted later, in the car. 22 hours. And the whole time I kept thinking, this is the trip I should have made 29 years ago, if I'd only known where to go. Byung-suk had arranged the visit personally, though he stayed away from the airport, sensing correctly that this reunion belonged to mother and daughter alone. He met Elizabeth for the first time that evening at the house, and when she saw him, she went very quiet. You're the one who found her, she said. I found Camila. I didn't know I was looking for anyone until I did. Elizabeth studied him for a long moment. This stranger, this billionaire, this widower who had loved and buried the daughter she never got to raise. Thank you, she finally said, for loving her when I couldn't. He didn't trust himself to answer that. He only nodded. The next morning, the 3 of them went to the grave together. Byung-suk, Camila, and Elizabeth. Elizabeth had asked, the night before, if she could bring something. Byung-suk hadn't asked what. In the morning she produced it from her bag. A small, yellowed infant's blanket, the corner embroidered with a single stitched initial, AG, sewn crookedly by a young mother's inexperienced hand 29 years earlier, before a hospital, before a lie, before any of it. I kept it, Elizabeth said, almost apologetically, as they walked toward the stone. I don't even know why. I told myself it was silly. A blanket for a baby who died. But some part of me never believed she was really gone. I think I was keeping it for a reunion I didn't dare hope for. They stood in front of the grave in silence. Elizabeth read the name carved into the stone. Giana. A name she hadn't chosen, given by strangers to a daughter that was hers. She knelt slowly, her hand trembling as she pressed it flat against the cold stone. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm so sorry it took 29 years. I'm so sorry I wasn't the one who raised you. I'm so sorry I believed the lie that let me stop looking." Her shoulders began to shake. Camila knelt beside her and put an arm around her. And for a long moment neither of them spoke, because there was nothing to say that could reach the size of what had been lost. "I used to sing to you," Elizabeth said, "through the tears to the stone, to the daughter who would never hear it. Both of you, the same lullaby. I wonder if anyone ever sang it to you here." Biamsuk, standing a respectful distance back, felt something in his chest give way that he hadn't expected. He had grieved Giana as a husband for 3 years. He had never once considered grieving her as someone's daughter, as a baby who'd been sung to, and then taken, and who had grown into a woman without ever knowing the mother who never stopped looking for her. He stepped forward and knelt as well, laying his hand briefly beside Elizabeth's on the stone. "She was loved here too," he said quietly. "Every day of her life with me. I promise you that." Elizabeth looked up at him, and for the first time since she'd learned the truth, something in her face eased, just slightly. Not healed, not resolved, but no longer entirely alone. She placed the small embroidered blanket at the base of the headstone and left it there. They stayed a long while after that. Elizabeth cried harder than either Biamsuk or Camila had ever seen a person cry, the particular wrenching grief of a mother finally allowed to mourn a daughter she had been forbidden, by a lie, from mourning properly for nearly 3 decades. That night, after Elizabeth and Camila had returned home, Biamsuk's mother sat alone in Giana's old sitting room, a room that had, technically, been converted into a guest study years ago, though none of the staff ever quite treated it as anything but hers. She had watched the grave visit from a distance she'd insisted on, out of some instinct that told her the moment belonged to Elizabeth, not to her. But watching Elizabeth's grief, raw, uncomplicated, entirely without the guilt that came from having known Giana and disliked her anyway, had shaken something loose in her that she had kept sealed since the funeral. She opened a drawer she rarely opened. Inside were a few things of Giana's that had never made it to storage. A scarf, a pair of reading glasses, a hair clip. She had told herself, each time she found a reason not to give these away, that it was simply forgetfulness. It wasn't. She had kept them the way a person keeps evidence of something they're not ready to be tried for. She held the scarf for a long time. She thought of the tea she'd once served Giana in this very room, the offer she'd made, "Name your price," and the quiet, unshaken way Giana had refused it. She thought of every dinner where she'd found some small, precise way to remind Giana she didn't belong. She thought of the wedding she'd almost boycotted. She thought of the illness, how she had visited the hospital exactly 4 times in the final months, always briefly, always with the excuse of some other obligation waiting. She had told herself at the time that her coldness was loyalty to the family, to a standard, to a version of her son's future she thought she was protecting. Watching Elizabeth today, she understood for the first time how small that reasoning actually was, set against a mother crossing an ocean for a grave. "I never once told you I was wrong," she said quietly, to the empty room, to the scarf in her hands. "I don't know if I'm telling you now, either. I don't know how." She did not cry, not the way Elizabeth had. Her grief had never learned how to be that open. But she sat there long after the house had gone quiet, and when she finally rose, she did something she had not done in 3 years. She carried the scarf herself to Camila's room the next morning, and left it folded on the bed without a note, unable yet to explain in words what she meant by it, only that it was time it belonged to someone again. Camila found it that afternoon. She didn't need a note to understand. In the weeks that followed, Camila became something the house had not had in 3 years. A living thread back to Giana without being Giana at all. She began visiting on weekends, first out of a sense of obligation to Biamsuk, then gradually because she wanted to. The staff who had gasped at first sight of her learned, slowly, to see her as herself. The housekeeper who'd nearly dropped a tea tray was the first to laugh naturally in her presence, teaching her, unprompted, the same 4 dishes Giana used to request most. Biamsuk gave her, eventually, one of Giana's belongings. Not the necklace, which Camila had never taken off since that first hotel meeting, but a journal, half filled with Giana's handwriting, most of it small domestic observations and a few lines, near the end, addressed to no one in particular about wanting to be remembered as more than an illness. I want you to have it, he told her. Not because you're her. Because you're the only person left who might actually want to know who she was, for her own sake and not for mine. Camila read it slowly, over many nights, and felt something she hadn't expected. Not just grief for a sister she'd lost before she'd even known she existed, but a strange, growing tenderness for the family that had once resented that same sister, and was now, awkwardly, teaching itself to love the version of her that had returned. Biamsuk's mother never became warm exactly, but she began setting a place for Camila at dinner without being asked. She began correcting Camila's Korean, gently, the way she might have once corrected a daughter-in-law she'd decided to accept. It was not an apology. It was, perhaps, the only form of one she knew how to offer. Elizabeth flew back to Seoul twice more that year, once for Chuseok, when the whole family visited the grave together, and once simply because, she said, she could no longer stand being an ocean away from either of her daughters at once. A year after the restaurant, Camila stood again at Giana's grave. Not in shock this time, not led there by anyone else, but on her own on a quiet Sunday morning, the way she now did most months. She had brought flowers and beside them, a small photograph. Herself, Biamsuk, Elizabeth, and his mother, taken at Chuseok, all 4 of them caught mid-laugh at something none of them could later remember. You'd like her, Camila said to the stone, meaning her mother. You'd have liked all of us, probably, eventually. Took us longer than it should have. She touched the necklace at her throat. The twin of the one buried with Giana. The one detail that had started an unraveling neither family could have predicted. I don't know why it happened this way, she said. I don't know why I only got to know you after you were gone. But I know you now a little, and I think that has to be enough. She stood a while longer, the way Elizabeth had taught her to, not rushing away from grief, but letting it sit beside her a moment, the way an old friend sits, without needing to be entertained. Then she rose and walked back toward the car, where Biamsuk was waiting to drive her home. Not to a house that had replaced Giana, but to one that had finally learned, a full year late, how to hold her memory without needing to bury it in silence too. Some people leave this world, but the love they gave us can still bring the people they were separated from back together. The end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and share to others. Also leave a comment to share your thought about the story.